Hello, everyone. Welcome to the Texas Blockchain Council's YouTube channel. I'm Jim Flint, the Chief Revenue Officer for the organization. And today I'm joined by Natalie Brunell. She of great fame in the cryptocurrency and especially in the Bitcoin space. Thank you for joining us today.
Thank you for having me. I don't think I'm of great fame, but I appreciate that.
Well, she does have over 26,000 subscribers. We might as well start there, in there, right?
Yeah.
They can follow you online in that particular location. We also have Twitter, your podcast. Why don't you do that? You'll probably do that better than I will.
Sure. Yeah. I host a podcast called Coinstories, which is primarily about Bitcoin and finance, economics, money. And I'm also on Twitter at Nat Brunell. That's where most of my followers are. And I comment on, the news of the day, especially Bitcoin topics, and super grateful. And I'm launching a show called Hard Money as well, which is going to be it's going to bridge Bitcoin with economic news. And we don't really have anything like that when it comes to video media outlets. So it's going to be an awesome new show launching this month.
Yes. And your background includes media extensively.
Yes.
I believe, went to school at Pepperdine, then Chicago, Northwestern, actually, which is where you live now. And you've worked in Sacramento markets in California, all over.
Yes.
Right? And you started kind of a podcast, like a career stories. And now you're telling Bitcoin stories. What was that progression like? Did you think you'd be doing what you're doing now?
No, not at all. This definitely came by surprise. But at the same time, when I look at my whole background, I feel like everything in my life has been preparing me for this almost.
Okay.
Like I was waiting for Bitcoin. So I'm first generation immigrant. Family moved to Chicago area when I was 5 years old.
Right?
From Poland.
Yeah.
Yep. So my parents grew up under communism, and the ideas of financial freedom, economic opportunity, sovereignty, that was really important to them. And so they moved here. They worked really, really hard. And when I was in college studying journalism, they lost everything in the financial crisis. So just as they had finally been able to afford a home in the US, the American dream, so to speak, that they came for, they lost it just as quickly. And I didn't understand what had happened. So I graduated into a recession. I ended up going to grad school, getting my master's in communication journalism. And then I set off for a 10-year career as a television journalist, which was really eye-opening because, again, I have this predisposition that there's something fundamentally broken in the system that we need to address when it comes to capital markets, the financial system, access to banking. And then I was also, as a reporter, watching these stories play out, watching, poverty increase, homelessness increase, public corruption, civil unrest. And every election that I would cover, right, the guys come in, they say, I'll be different, I'll spend money, I'll change this. And only to find out that the problems would just balloon after that. And so in 2017, I discovered Bitcoin, and I was skeptical, like so many people probably in the audience.
Sure.
I was like, oh, this thing's a scam. I'm going to lose all my money. I have no idea what this is. It wasn't until I read the Bitcoin Standard that I started to go down the rabbit hole, really understand. And at the time I had a podcast, which was called Career Stories.
Right.
Just a total hobby. I loved hearing people's backstories of how they got to be where they are, how they achieved
You're
success.
connecting with media personalities in the different markets and saying, what did you do to arrive here? And it's amazing. Each story unfolds.
Yeah.
The way you told it.
I love biographies, autobiographies, especially if there's, some major obstacle that people had to overcome, or rags to riches stories. They were always very inspiring to me. And so when I became passionate about Bitcoin and I was going down the rabbit hole, I thought, well, maybe I'll just do a season of my podcast.
Well, hold on a second. But just to back up a second, didn't you move from a smaller market in California to like a top 80 market rather quickly?
Yeah.
Like you kind of had the rags to riches in the media.
No. Well, if you think riches are in journalism, TV journalism, not for maybe like the few people, anchoring a couple of the top shows.
Yeah, I got it. Okay,
for the majority of everybody else, not at all. But yeah, I did have a quick rise. I went from a very small market to the state capital in California to ABC News as a national correspondent, which, I worked really hard for it, but I took a very traditional path. And then I did podcasting as a hobby. And then it turned into a Bitcoin podcast that's now my career, which I never expected.
Yes. And you're interviewing people like Michael Saylor.
Yeah.
And one of the things too that I heard you say on one of the podcasts, and I'm looking at my notes to make sure I get this exactly right, you called Bitcoin uniting, right? And as we sit here at the Texas Capitol today, how do we help the left and the right? Because as you mentioned, you heard politicians say, well, in this situation, it's broken, it's not fixed. And then we've got this whole new way of the future of finance, really.
Yep. Well, one of the things I witnessed when I was a reporter, especially my last maybe 4 or so years reporting, was the increasing polarization of our country, the increasing division. And I truly feel that when I learned about Bitcoin, I finally understood that it was because of the pressure that was exerted on society by the fact that people feel left behind with this money printing and inflation that drives capital and money and assets to the few at the expense of everybody else. So people feel frustrated, right? Yeah. I mean, people can privatize their gains, socialize their losses, and that has a real impact on society. We lose our middle class, we lose the labor class. People feel like they can't afford a house, education, all of it. And so I witnessed that play out. And it was really sad because at the time when I didn't understand Bitcoin, I thought, what in the world could bring us together? What could fix this problem, right? I mean, and I didn't even understand that money was at the core of the problem. So Bitcoin, I find to be really inspiring because it truly embodies the principles and the virtues of both parties. The idea of individualism and small government and sovereignty and financial freedom for the right, but also financial inclusion, access, being able to allow the poor to accumulate wealth. That's for the left, right? Like it bridges this divide. And that's what we really need, because sometimes I feel like everyone's it's one slingshot after another from one party to the next. And you almost have to pick a side. You can't even be in the middle today. You're just plopped in a category. I certainly have been, and it's a little bit frustrating. And I just feel like we need something that unites us. And I feel like a democratic form of money that no one controls, no one can manipulate, that's truly scarce, is something that both parties can finally agree on.
No, they say people vote with their wallets, right? And as we look at the opportunity that sits in front of us, we're finding that the connections that occur, we did some polling in the state of Texas. And I'm going to get your view to Texas here in a second as we sit in the Capitol building. But what we found out was that people were as likely in the state of Texas to vote Democratic, Republican, or Bitcoin, if you will. Because as far as they were concerned, right, it wasn't about being one or the other. It was like being something that could be trusted. And I think that may be the fundamental issue. I don't know how you feel about that, but there's a level of distrust that gets solved. I don't want to say algebraically. How would you say it? What would you, in terms of the monetary policy being immutable?
Well, I do think that there's a massive distrust and people really don't understand what the problem is. And I think this type of situation where people feel left behind is when we see these populist uprisings, right? And we have politicians that can sort of exploit the general frustration that people feel and use it to point blame, as opposed to really looking at the issue. Because I'm going to be honest, I don't think that a lot of politicians understand how economics works. Unfortunately, our system is so geared toward this Keynesian economic theory of inflation is good, consumerism is good, going into debt is okay, that it's, I think, flipped people's minds a little bit that, we can just kick the can down the road forever. And unfortunately, we can't. It has a real impact. And the people who are closest to the monetary spigot, the money printer, they always benefit. They're fine. The Washington insiders are okay. They go into their 80s with their jobs and they have pension plans and they have speaking fees for $200K. And like the average person, that's not representative of Americans, right? So there is this distrust. And I think that if we can have a money that separates, I guess, money from the state or money from power, that could really provide some opportunity for a new economic system based on value, based on what people bring to the table, no matter who they are, where they come from, because there is no money printer that they can be close to.
No, there is not. And one of the things that's transcended over time, probably during the era that you described, and now we're talking about sociological elements of it, but I'm interested in your point of view, because people now also are able to communicate like they've never been able to before. Like it used to be that you would broadcast, and that's kind of the space that you were in, and maybe it was ABC, NBC, CBS, and Fox. But now everybody has something that they're able to share through their phone in real time about their predicament. And what's interesting about The Social Dilemma is what I'll call it, and it's actually a show on Netflix if you haven't checked it out. It's definitely worth seeing. But people are encouraged to engage, and the engagement involves polarity, right? And so your frustration or anger gets acknowledged, rewarded, liked, commented on. For sure. And so we are creating a lot more friction in the societal portion of what's transpiring.
Completely. Yeah. I think that our nerve endings are already heightened and like a little bit stimulated, and social media kind of puts a little pin in them and like it jabs at it. And that's unfortunate, right? It's not necessarily the cause, but it exacerbates the issue because it allows people to express themselves. At the same time, the democratization of media is powerful, right? You don't necessarily even need to go to a traditional college anymore. You can learn a lot on YouTube. You can teach yourself around the world, right? I started my careers because I'm able to broadcast my own podcast, be on my own YouTube page. At the same time, you have to now, as an audience, be very careful because anyone can put information out there, right? You have to really like find the right sources, make sure they can be trusted. So it's really interesting.
And you've interviewed Michael Saylor, right? But you've had, it ranges. There's a wide variety. You've had really technical people online too, telling like how things are hashed, and like you're on the screen, like diving in, picking stuff up. And it's great that you share that with everyone and how you share that with everyone. So thank you for doing that.
I appreciate it. I always wanted to hear kind of the backstories of how folks got into Bitcoin, because it's so interesting. Everyone has their own story. Everyone had their own career path.
Right.
And to be honest, I will be completely honest, just reading this space, educating myself in this space, I felt like the biggest voices in Bitcoin are some of the smartest people in the world. And I wanted to learn from them. And so I wanted to hear their backstories, and it's been great to sort of get that human interest angle to it.
And I have another quote from you, if I may. It says, you once said that Bitcoin puts the power of transactions back into the hands of people. Do you think that's the way we solve all these different psychological, sociological, political issues that we're facing as a country? I mean, you have some worldwide views here.
Yeah, I mean, I definitely think that there should be more power, more sovereignty, more opportunity that goes to the average person, like to the little guy. And I kind of see my parents in the little guy, right? They came here to this country to work hard, pay their taxes, play by the rules. And all they wanted was just, an average life for their family to be able to afford a house, education, maybe a vacation once a year, something crazy, right? And I think everyone has different motivations that bring them to whatever, skill or career that they pursue. And I just think that there needs to be more access to opportunity. So I feel like if there's no one in control of the money, there is no system of sort of elites or insiders or the people behind the money printer, then it allows the economy to form based on real interest rates, first of all, not manipulated ones, artificially lowered ones, goods and services, actual production, people saving to acquire capital so that they can invest it. I just think our whole system is skewed. It's like we're a plane flying without an altimeter. I mean, that's how I see our economy right now.
So you just came off a panel. You hosted a panel.
Yeah.
Right. And you asked the question, I don't know if you use fees and rates interchangeably, but the name of the panel was, are record low fees good or bad for Bitcoin? Are you talking about Fed rate?
No. Okay. Like fees on the network.
Fair enough. So I'll ask you kind of either or. Pick one of those two. How did the panel come out, and what do you think about interest rates in this environment for a currency like Bitcoin?
Okay, sure. So to start with the panel, I'm super grateful that I was asked, because I'm definitely not the most technical person, but I was with a panel of excellent speakers, Jimmy Song, Alex Thorne, who actually wrote a research paper on fees and how they are record low right now on the network for many reasons: block size, SegWit, Lightning Network, but they are record low right now, especially due to the volatility and or in the midst of the volatility. So it was really fascinating to learn, because in general, most people would think like, I want fees to be low, but then when you look out, when in the future, when all the Bitcoins are mined, when we're only existing on fees as opposed to that subsidy, like what will happen? Are they going to be enough? The fees are certainly more competitive than altcoins. So it was a very wide-ranging, interesting conversation where I felt like I learned a lot. But then when it comes to interest rates and the greater macro picture, I think about this a lot. And I think we need more media outlets and just people out in public bridging that gap between what's happening in the economy and the macro picture with Bitcoin, and how like we need to adopt Bitcoin and how it will address some of these problems. But basically, as I've been saying, like the Fed has been backed into a corner. I think they've lost a lot of credibility because they have to hike interest rates to take inflation seriously. But yet, if they do, it tanks the whole market. And so how long will they let it bleed out? And will they get to a point where they're going to really set off, a long-term recession or something far worse, a real bust? And how are they going to back that up? Because everyone's expecting the Fed put, but like how many times can you have a Fed put, right? The bubble just gets bigger. The middle class gets crushed more and more each time. Inflation is running rampant. So I think that's the big question mark, right? Like how long is this going to go? Is the Fed going to come in and print again? Like
that's been their pattern
and
for
how
a decade, right?
How can we keep this Ponzi scheme going? So.
Yeah. Well, you were on Fox News, I think last November.
Yeah.
And I was watching you doing a great job as representing the space, if you will. And thank you for that. Yeah. We all appreciate that. But I was looking, and the Bitcoin price was at 60,000, right? This was back when inflation was transitory. Okay. So at least now we're no longer in denial, right? Let's give ourselves credit for saying we have an issue. that they're trying to fix.
Yes.
Or at least I enthusiastically believe that the energy is positive and that they're trying to do the best they can with the mechanical tools that they have.
Completely. Yeah. Yes. They only have so many levers that they can pull. And I think that the Fed always acts like they have a dial switch when really it's more of like an up and down, on and off switch.
That's a good.
But I really feel for the people out there who Bitcoin has been in the spotlight more and more, especially when the price was running up. And so I feel for the people that bought like 50s, 60s, and I've been buying all the way up and down because I dollar cost average. And I just want to remind people, it's like a really important time to mention that, you need to zoom out. This is a long-term horizon investment because yes, it could be frustrating that you bought at 60, it dropped down to 29 or 30, but wouldn't you rather have bought at 60 than when it goes to 100? And
For sure, right.
I mean, we're all of us, we wish we were earlier. I'm constantly with people that, were in it since 2013, 2014. And I'm like, gosh, I'm so late. But yet people say that about me being in it in 2017. So everybody's early right now. We're 13 years in and we have not reached 1 billion people in penetration. We're expecting to by 2025. So I'm very bullish on all of it. But yeah, we'll see what happens.
Yeah, we at the Blockchain Council are trying to onboard people one person at a time too, right? And make the space more attractive for everyone. We appreciate what you do. Now, you're in Austin. It's pretty hot here.
It's so hot. Yeah, I'm probably sweating.
It's like unseasonably hot, just so you know. It's going to be 107.
Are you trying to sell me on living here?
No, most people like it here. But what I am going to sell you on is coming back in November to the Blockchain Summit when the moderate temperature. If I can guarantee the weather will be in the mid 70s, will you guarantee that you'll come back and join us?
Yes, I would come for the 70s in Austin. Yeah.
Yeah, we would love to have you host a panel at the Texas Blockchain Summit. We routinely publish a Bitcoin brew. It's kind of more or less our daily podcast. We may set you up with some people that work in that regard. But we really appreciate you coming to the Capitol building here today and joining us to talk on the Texas Blockchain Council's channel.
Thank you so much for having me.
Yeah, thanks, Natalie.